He's a longtime member of the White House press corps and a prior U.S. Senate staffer turned podcaster. As the author of 5 books surrounding White House history, Paul Brandus has established himself as the leading voice in historical discourse. I'm Julie Holliday. We hope you enjoy meeting Paul on this episode of Evergreen Spotlight and to see for yourself why The Atlantic calls him one of the top Washington insiders you should follow. Welcome, Paul. You are here to speak about your 4th podcast on the Evergreen Network, Disinformation, and we're curious how you define disinformation and why it is so important in today's society.
Well, disinformation is the more malicious cousin of misinformation. Misinformation is simply if you see or read or hear something, Julie, that is wrong, but not deliberately wrong. I mean, we all make mistakes with things. Disinformation, however, as I mentioned, is more malicious. It's when someone deliberately manufactures something that is false, either a false video, false audio, tweets, something that is just flat out wrong, and the person knew that it was flat out wrong, or again, made a phony image or something and deliberately posted it with the deliberate intent to mislead or fool or frankly rip off someone. That is disinformation. It is a really big deal. And, it's always existed going back to the beginning of time, really. But now, thanks to things like social media and artificial intelligence, it can really spread quickly, much further, much more ubiquitously than ever before. It's a really big deal, and I think people need to be aware of how bad it can be, how we're all exposed to it without even knowing it. So it's a really big deal.
Are you able to maybe shine a light on some of the examples?
Well, there are all kinds of, I think we've all seen, for example, campaign ads in a political, this is an election year, obviously. We all see campaign ads where sometimes candidates say things that they know to be wrong, or you see tweets where people just frankly, not necessarily candidates, but just their followers, say things that are just deliberately false with the intent, again, of misleading supporters, right, dividing one group of people from another, that kind of thing. So that's just one example. But there are kinds of, there's disinformation in the financial sector where investors, where scam artists will try and rip off people by promising, an investment return that obviously is not realistic. That kind of thing. So we see it on Wall Street. We see it even in the international arena where countries can use disinformation to, in terms of, military and war and that kind of thing. The Russians, for example, have used disinformation rather effectively in this war in Ukraine, for example. So it's literally every sector of our society. It's getting much worse, and it's getting much worse much more quickly.
I like how you differentiate between the malicious intent and doing it in an error. And my question for you is, how do you verify the information that is on your show?
Well, one way to verify information is it's really a multifaceted thing, Julie. I think, first of all, people need to be aware of how government works. There are a lot of people who don't understand, for example, that here in the United States, we have 3 branches of government. We have the executive, that's the president. We have the legislature, that's the House and Senate. And then, of course, we have the judicial branch, which is the court system. There are some people who think, for example, that the president has all the power. He's not answerable to the courts or the Congress and can do whatever he wants. This is not a dictatorial system, and yet some people seem to think, for example, that presidents have all the power. So I think knowing basic civics is very important, and I think it's disturbing, frankly, that schools over the past generation have really cut back on the teaching of this. That makes it much harder for people to know the basic facts of how things work, how laws are passed, how power is shared. When we don't know that, it makes it easier for disinformation to flourish. So we have to have a basic understanding of civics. Beyond that, I think it's very important for people to read widely. Don't just watch one channel because the channel may align with your political views. It's important to broaden your horizons, listen to other points of view. It's important to talk with people who may disagree with you, but might have legitimate things to say that can, maybe cause you to think a little bit differently about things. So, in other words, I think people have to get out of the silos that we exist in and listen to others. And that's the way it always was, again, until social media came around. And that really enabled us to just, hang out, so to speak, only with those with whom we tend to agree. It's had this effect of driving us further apart. So that's one additional thing that I would urge people to do. Listen to others, read widely, absorb information beyond what it is that you're kind of predisposed to believe.
I think that's a wonderful tip to making sure that the information that you're getting is credible. As a White House reporter, you have had a front row seat to some of the most memorable experiences, and I wonder if you could just shine a light on some of those for us.
Well, I spent probably about 13, 14 years going to the White House and being a member of the White House press corps with the Secret Service credentials and all of that, and being in the briefing room and all of that. And it's really fascinating to see presidents up close. I think I've met 6 presidents over the course of my life. It's really a privilege to be there and to talk with them, even if only a very brief conversation. It's always a thrill. And I don't care who the president is. Meeting any president is really a thrill. Some perhaps more than others. But it's interesting to sort of be in the sausage factory, if you will, to see how things get done, to be in the West Wing and watch how sort of the machinery of the executive branch, again, just one part of government, to see how that works. Earlier in my career, I worked on Capitol Hill too, so I sort of saw that from the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue too. So it's been kind of an interesting ride.
Do you have a favorite room of the White House?
Well, the first book I wrote was called Under This Roof, where I talked about 21 different rooms in the White House and some of the things that took place in those rooms. I think probably the one room, if people were to ask me, it's the room that everybody knows today, Julie, as the Lincoln bedroom. Of course, when Lincoln was president, he did not sleep in what we now know as the Lincoln bedroom. In his time, that was really his office. He slept down the hall in the same room that all presidents have slept in. It only became the Lincoln bedroom when the White House was remodeled between 1948 and 52, when Harry Truman was president. And Truman, as many Americans do, idolized Lincoln and wanted to make what was Lincoln's office sort of a shrine to him. So he turned it into what we now know as the Lincoln bedroom. And it has authentic furniture and the big rosewood bed that Lincoln slept in, that kind of thing. But if you look at pictures, paintings of Lincoln's office during the Civil War, and then look at pictures of the Lincoln bedroom today, you'll see that the room is quite the same in terms of the curtains and the chandeliers and all of that. So that's really the one room I think that's just so fascinating. There are many others, but I think that's at the top of the list.
Your knowledge is so rich. It's no wonder that you have several shows and several books. And really shifting gears here for a minute, just into the other shows that you have on the Evergreen Network, Countdown to Dallas, one of my favorites. It's a look at the broken life of Lee Harvey Oswald, JFK's killer. West Wing Reports, a show founded in 2009, and that provides reports for television across the U.S. and also internationally. From First Lady to Jackie O, that's your companion podcast to Jackie, the book that you've written. Do you have a favorite of the four that are on the network?
Well, they're all interesting in their own way. And it's really a privilege to be able to do a podcast because, books are one thing. Books are hard work. But a podcast is another thing entirely because podcasts, of course, revolve around the use of sound. So you have to be very diligent, if that's the word, about using that properly as part of your storytelling. So,
Yes.
When I worked in the radio business for a long time, people know the phrase that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I think in terms of radio and podcasting that the opposite is true, meaning that a word is worth 1,000 pictures. So in other words, you take the old saying, turn it upside down. I think radio and podcasts are so much fun because it really allows the listener to see a picture in their minds. The imagination is far more powerful than anything even the most talented film director could do. The imagination is just a very powerful platform, and radio and podcasts, which are kind of similar, obviously, allows you to do that. So podcasts are just, to me, they're just a lot of fun to do.
It's so well said, and I think it's very well illustrated in Countdown to Dallas, just the way that the sound is used and the way that the interviews, even interviewing Oswald's wife, is so powerful. I just think that is incredible. And do you have anything else particular that you are wanting to cover with his life in your career?
In terms of Lee Harvey Oswald, I think that I don't really want to go beyond what I'm doing with this particular show in terms of Oswald. I mean, he clearly was just a bad character, disturbed, unstable, and all the rest. And I think as I tell his story, as it in the end collides with that of John F. Kennedy for just a few dreadful seconds, I don't really want to really go beyond that. It's just such a wretched life, a wretched individual, and how he changed American history in such an awful way. I just think you tell his story, let it speak for itself, and then move on.
Now, thinking back around to Disinformation, what are you hoping listeners take away from that podcast?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I want them to understand that we're living in a very different era now. We're bombarded by information everywhere: social media, television, radio, newspapers, magazines, on and on and on. It is everywhere, and I think it's harder than ever, Julie, for people to tell what is accurate, what is true, and what is inaccurate and not true. It is harder than ever. Conversely, it's easier than ever for us to be fooled. I think people need to understand that. I think people don't like to be told they are wrong. I think people think that, they believe what they want to believe, and they don't want to be told that what you believe is wrong or that the facts you have are wrong. And yet that's the situation. So I think there are a lot of people, again, without naming names or candidates or issues like that, I think there are a lot of false narratives around serious issues in this country, like immigration and inflation and gun control and abortion, all the things that we all care about, but come at them from different angles. It seems like there are two sets of facts in this country around a lot of these controversial issues. And until we start agreeing on one central set of facts, it's going to be really hard for us to make progress on any of these issues. I think we all believe that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Why can't we have similar basic facts about other things? And we don't. And I think that's part of the problem.
Paul, thank you so much. With respect to your time, we so appreciate you being on Evergreen Spotlight.
Thank you. My pleasure, Julie.
For our listeners, if you have ideas or examples of disinformation you would like Paul and the team to cover, you can email him at pbrandus@gmail.com, and you can find Disinformation on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.